The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Sarah Martinez adjusted her name tag one more time, smoothing down the wrinkled fabric of her blue vest. At 23, she had the kind of tired eyes that belonged to someone much older, the weight of responsibility etched in the fine lines around them. The automatic doors of MegaMart whooshed open as the morning rush began, and she took her position at Register 7, the same spot she'd occupied for the past 2 years. Sarah had been working at MegaMart since she was 21, right after she dropped out of college when her mother fell ill. The medical bills had piled up like autumn leaves, and someone had to keep the lights on. Her mother had passed away 6 months ago, leaving Sarah alone with her 8-month-old daughter, Emma, and a mountain of debt that seemed to grow taller each day. The baby stirred in the employee break room, where Sarah had fashioned a makeshift crib out of a cardboard box lined with soft blankets. It wasn't ideal, but the store manager, Mrs. Henderson, had grudgingly allowed it after Sarah explained her situation. The daycare costs were more than half her paycheck, and her neighbor who usually watched Emma had fallen through that morning. "Good morning, how are you today?" Sarah's voice carried the practiced cheerfulness of retail workers everywhere as she began scanning items for her first customer. Milk, bread, diapers, the essentials that she herself often had to choose between when her paycheck ran thin. 3 hours into her shift, Emma's cries echoed from the break room. Sarah's heart clenched, but she couldn't leave her register. The line of customers stretched back into the pharmacy section, and Mrs. Henderson had made it clear that abandoning her post was grounds for immediate termination. Sarah tried to catch the eye of Jessica, who worked at the customer service desk, hoping she might check on the baby, but Jessica was dealing with an irate customer returning a broken blender. The crying intensified, and Sarah felt her milk coming in, a biological response she couldn't control. She pressed her lips together, scanning items faster, hoping to work through the line quickly. But customers seemed to move in slow motion, counting out exact change, questioning prices, asking for manager overrides. "Ma'am, your baby is crying pretty loud back there," said an elderly customer, his voice not unkind but concerned. "I know, sir. I'm sorry. She'll settle down in a moment," Sarah replied, her cheeks burning with embarrassment and worry. But Emma didn't settle down. If anything, the cries became more desperate, the kind that told a mother her child was hungry, not just fussy. Sarah looked around desperately. Mrs. Henderson was nowhere to be seen, probably in her office doing paperwork and deliberately ignoring the situation. Finally, during a brief lull between customers, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She flipped her register light off and rushed to the break room. Emma's face was red and blotchy from crying, her tiny fists waving in the air. Sarah scooped her up, feeling the familiar weight of her daughter in her arms, the way Emma immediately began to root against her chest. "I know, baby girl. Mama's here," she whispered, settling into the uncomfortable plastic chair in the corner of the break room. She pulled her vest aside and lifted her shirt, allowing Emma to latch on. The immediate silence was profound, both the baby's contentment and Sarah's relief filling the small space. She had planned to take her lunch break in an hour, but Emma couldn't wait. Babies didn't operate on retail schedules, and hungry was hungry. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the stress of the morning ebb away as her daughter nursed. These were the moments that made everything worthwhile: the overtime shifts, the aching feet, the difficult customers. Emma's small hand curled around Sarah's finger, and she felt that familiar surge of fierce love and determination. What Sarah didn't know was that someone was watching. Marcus Chen had built RetailMax from a single store into a nationwide chain of 847 locations over the past 15 years. At 42, he was worth more than $300 million, but he'd never forgotten his roots. His parents had immigrated from Taiwan with nothing but hope and work ethic, opening a small corner market where Marcus had learned the value of customer service and treating employees like family. When RetailMax had acquired the struggling MegaMart chain 6 months ago, Marcus had insisted on visiting every location personally. Not the typical corporate visits with advance notice and rolled-out red carpets, but real visits where he could see how the stores actually operated. Today, he was dressed in khakis and a polo shirt, a fake name tag reading, "Mike," pinned to his chest, ostensibly there for a routine maintenance check on the point-of-sale systems. He'd been observing the store for 2 hours, taking mental notes about everything from the cleanliness of the floors to the efficiency of the checkout process. Register 7 had caught his attention because the young woman operating it seemed to be juggling more than just scanning barcodes. She was clearly distressed about something, constantly glancing toward the back of the store, and when a baby's cries had started echoing through the space, he'd seen her shoulders tense with worry. Marcus had followed the sound during his supposed system check, and that's when he'd discovered the break room setup, the cardboard box, the carefully arranged blankets, the clear signs that someone was trying to make the best of an impossible situation. When the cashier had rushed back to care for the crying infant, he'd positioned himself where he could observe without intruding. What he saw broke his heart and filled him with admiration in equal measure. The young woman, Sarah, according to her name tag, was nursing her baby with a tenderness that spoke of deep love, but also with the quick efficiency of someone who knew she was working on borrowed time. She kept glancing at the door, clearly worried about getting back to her register. Her uniform was clean but worn, and Marcus noticed the way she'd arranged her break area to maximize both comfort for the baby and visibility to the main floor. "There's my good girl," Sarah murmured to Emma, who was now feeding contentedly. "Mama's got to get back to work soon, but you needed this, didn't you?" She stroked the baby's fine hair, marveling as she always did at the perfect miniature fingernails, the impossibly long eyelashes, the way Emma's breathing synchronized with her own. Sarah had learned to nurse quickly and efficiently. She'd read every article about returning to work while breastfeeding, joined online support groups for working mothers, and mastered the art of pumping milk in bathroom stalls and storage closets. But some days, like today, there was no substitute for the real thing. Emma had been fussy all morning, probably picking up on Sarah's stress about bringing her to work. The plan had been for her neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez to watch Emma, as she had been doing for the past month. But Mrs. Rodriguez's own granddaughter had come down with a fever, and she couldn't risk exposing Emma to illness. Sarah had called everyone she could think of. Her cousin who sometimes helped out was working a double shift at the hospital, her former college roommate lived 2 hours away, and professional daycare for just one day would cost more than she'd make in tips that week. "I could lose my job for this," she whispered to Emma, who gazed up at her with those serious dark eyes that seemed to understand everything. "But what else could I do? Leave you alone? Never. We're a team, you and me." Emma had finished nursing and was making those sleepy sounds that meant she'd be ready for a nap soon. Sarah was gently burping her when she heard footsteps in the hallway. Her heart jumped. If Mrs. Henderson found her here, she'd be fired for sure. The store had a strict policy about leaving registers unattended, and bringing a baby to work, even in an emergency, was definitely against company rules. But the person who appeared in the doorway wasn't Mrs. Henderson. It was a man Sarah didn't recognize, wearing a polo shirt and khakis with a maintenance contractor's badge. He was Asian, probably in his 40s, with kind eyes and an expression of concern rather than disapproval. "I'm sorry," Sarah said quickly, instinctively shielding Emma with her arms. "I know I shouldn't be here, but she was hungry and crying, and I couldn't." "No need to apologize," Marcus said gently. He'd been trying to decide how to approach this situation without revealing his true identity. "I'm Mike. I'm here doing some work on the computer systems. I heard the crying and wanted to make sure everything was okay." Sarah relaxed slightly but remained guarded. In her experience, most men didn't understand the realities of working motherhood, and she'd learned to be defensive about her choices. "Everything's fine. I just need to feed my daughter. I'll be back at my register in a few minutes." Marcus looked around the break room, the flickering fluorescent light, the ancient microwave that probably hadn't been cleaned in months, the uncomfortable chairs that were clearly designed more for storage than for people to actually use. "Is this where you usually take your breaks?" "When I can take them, yes." Sarah's voice had an edge to it. She wasn't sure what this maintenance guy was getting at, but she didn't have time for small talk. Every minute away from her register was a minute closer to getting written up or worse. "And where does your daughter usually stay during your shifts?" Sarah hesitated. She didn't know this man, and something about his questions seemed too purposeful for casual concern. But Emma chose that moment to make one of her adorable baby sounds, and the man's face fell.